Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we have had so much fun trying out all of the features like Q&As and polls that let us be really creative and engage with our audience. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome to episode 58 of Podcast Royal, where we cover the back half of the Cambridge's Caribbean tour and the reactions surrounding it.
Then we head back to the UK for Prince Philip's memorial service. Plus, we discuss Meghan's forthcoming podcast, which officially has a name, and Queen Elizabeth's very first British Vogue cover.
We'll round out this episode with a fantastic interview with Robert Hardman, author of the new book, Queen of Our Times, The Life of Queen Elizabeth II, which is, get this, a 730-page biography of Her Majesty, and it's out this week. So let's get into it.
Welcome back to episode 58 of Podcast Royal. Man, we've got quite the episode for listeners today. It's going to be a big one. It's a monster. But first, as always, how are you and what are you into this week?
Well, I am doing lovely, Rachel, and I have to shout out a big congrats to you on your team's big basketball win last night. Our listeners might not be into sports, but every so often we do give a shout out if we have a big win for a team we love.
I'll cover this in what I'm into, but I have 3 words: Rock, Chalk, Jayhawk.
So this week, I have been spring cleaning at my house, and I've been, doing all of those chores that you put off during winter, all the maintenance items, catching up on all of that. I changed out a light fixture this past weekend, and, it seems like a small little change, but you really wouldn't believe the difference just changing out a light fixture can make in the way, a room looks. So I've been up to that. And speaking of spring cleaning, what I'm into this week is season 2 of The Home Edit is out on Netflix. Have you seen that show, Rachel?
Oh, I love it. And I'm about halfway through season 2, and I'm actually probably going to finish it tonight because the episodes are like 40 minutes a piece.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to start it tonight. I was going to say I've not started season 2 yet. I did watch season 1, and then I saw season 2 dropped, and I'm super excited about it. It's, I'm in the mood to spring clean and organize. So we talk a lot about shows on here, and everybody knows I love those no drama reality shows, like the organizing shows. I love house hunters. I love cooking competitions. So, I know a lot of people probably think that's boring, but I try to throw in the occasional Hallmark mystery every now and then too for a little excitement. Actually, okay, so speaking of Netflix, no joke, I was scrolling on my home screen earlier and I saw that they have a category of shows called Gentle British Reality TV.
Gentle British Reality TV? What does that mean?
So it had shows like, of course, it was like Great British Baking Show, Amazing Interiors, The Big Flower Fight. So I was like, I'm pretty sure this category was made.
That's tailor-made for you. By the way, okay, speaking of reality shows, you know that the day this episode airs, April 6th, The Ultimatum on Netflix is out, and we've talked about that on this show before. You asked if I would watch it, and I've got it on my queue. Like, I've got a reminder set for tomorrow. So are you going to watch that?
I am, yes. I watched 1 and 2 of Love is Blind, and so I'll watch this one as well.
Yeah, I'll be watching. So we'll discuss our thoughts on that next episode.
Definitely. So what are you into this week?
Well, I'm into a lot this week. I mean, this week we are recording this as we always do on Tuesday nights. Last night, Monday night, was for our non-American listeners, the NCAA college basketball national championship. So I went to undergrad at the University of Kansas, and then I went to grad school at Ole Miss. But Kansas was playing North Carolina, which is, again, this is not a sports show, but this North Carolina is a huge rival of Kansas's. It goes all the way back to 2003. I won't bore you with this, but our coach, Roy Williams, left Kansas for North Carolina. A lot of people, including my 17-year-old self, were very hurt by that. And so anyway, it was a late night last night. I'm exhausted. I am bleary-eyed and struggling, but so happy. I cried literal tears. It was very emotional. And I'm just so thrilled about that. I mean, it's not every day you're a national champion. So again, rock, chalk, Jayhawk. But on the royal front, Vanity Fair has announced a new podcast. It's called Dynasty, about the royal family. It's going to be hosted by Vanity Fair's two royal experts, Katie Nicholl and Aaron Vanderhoof. And as of this recording, only the trailer is out, but I really can't wait for this show. So I have a quick fun story about Katie Nicholl. She's a really respected royal expert. Back when I was just starting out royal reporting, and I only had my blog, the Duchess Commentary, this would have been 3 years ago, 2019. Katie, God bless her, granted me an interview, and it was the thrill of my life. I couldn't believe that she said yes. I was completely unknown, like just starting out, and I've never forgotten her kindness since. So I'm a big fan of Katie. So I can't wait to listen to that show. And we won the national championship last night. I can't help but mention that one more time. I also want to point out, on the flip side of that, what I'm not into this week. So as if Prince Philip's memorial the other day wasn't sad enough, Peter Phillips brings a girlfriend with him. He has a girlfriend. It breaks my heart. And longtime Princess Diana photographer Patrick Demarche, I'm going to mispronounce this word and I'm so sorry, Demarchelier. I knew I would butcher that, even though I practiced it a few times, but his talent speaks volumes. He died at the age of 78 last week. Both of those news items broke my heart, and I've had far too much Andrew content this week for my liking, either because he escorted Her Majesty at Prince Philip's memorial, or weirdly over the weekend there was an Instagram writ on Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife's page, but it was written by him about the Falkland conflict. So I need less Andrew in my life. I'm hearing he might be at the Platinum Jubilee, so I'm over it.
I totally agree. I saw that Instagram post as well. And
was that not bizarre? Well, that was very strange.
It was really strange. Yes. I read it and, had some thoughts, and I just thought, wow, that's really, really interesting to pop up on Fergie's page.
I don't understand that, but it's taken down now. So apparently they got the message, but anyway, so big highs and lows over here, but we're going to hop into segment 1, which is your fashion pick of the week. What you got?
Well, this week, of course, I've got another favorite from the tour, probably very predictable. And I thought, since we'll talk about more from the tour, I'll also throw in some non-tour fashion comments as well. But as far as the royal tour goes, it is no surprise that my favorite fashion pick this week is the stunning green Jenny Packham princess gown Kate wore in Jamaica. I mean, this is exactly what I think of when I think of royal attire. I mean, don't you just think like classic Disney princess when you see that dress?
Yes, and you and I were together when we saw that dress for the first time. We were having pizza, and here comes this green dress on my Instagram feed, and I think it took both of our breath away.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, everything from even the little yellow ribbon and the portrait of the queen to the tulle, the sparkling crystals, that off the shoulder style. I mean, it was so classic. Loved that dress. And I think it would be really hard for me to pick between that one and the pink one.
The green one wins for me out of the pink and the green. Honestly, my ranking would be green, blue, pink. But not that I didn't love the pink. I loved the pink. I loved them all. but I think the blue would probably, I just love that color. See, I love all the dresses, but like I'm looking at the whole look, like the whole package, the hair, the makeup, everything. And from that perspective, it's green in Jamaica, blue in the Bahamas, and then the hot pink in Belize for me.
So I think, when I look at that green gown, I love everything about it. So much so that if it were a different color, I think I would still love it in
Hmm.
almost any color. Now, the
Hmm.
pink gown is beautiful, but I think what I love most about it is the color. If it was another
Yeah,
color, I don't know that it would be quite as high on my list.
that's a good point. I would tend to agree with you on that.
So, following the tour, we had the Duke of Edinburgh service of Thanksgiving, which we'll talk about later. But we did get to see so many royals together at this service, and there were a lot of standout moments as far as some fashion goes. So, I first of all really love to see Prince Philip's family wearing that Edinburgh green shade. Did you notice that, Rachel?
I did. I thought that was really touching. And people didn't understand at first because they, of course, expected them to wear black. But when you dug a little deeper, you could see why they chose that color.
Right. Yes. It's the official color of the Duke of Edinburgh. So, everything from his vehicles to uniforms for his staff were that color of green. And so those who wore it did it as a tribute to the late Prince Philip. And, we saw, I think it was Her Majesty, Princess Anne, and even Camilla all had that green color on. And I just thought it was a special way to honor him, and another, great way to send a message through fashion, which they do a lot.
I loved it.
Um, Another fashion moment I noticed was Princess Beatrice. So she had this like sort of dark, like black or charcoal coat on. That wasn't really my favorite. But she paired it with this deep burgundy color fascinator, matching bag, dress, and shoes. It was kind of this whole monochromatic look. And, I have to say, the color that she chose, I thought it complemented her hair and her skin tone so well. We were just talking in the last episode about how colors can look really great or not so great depending on your hair and skin. And I
Mhm.
said yellow just tends to not look great on me. But I thought she nailed it with this. I liked the monochromatic play with the different textures. The bag was sort of a leather material, and the shoes and the fascinator were velvet. And I thought it looked really great. Did you notice her outfit?
I'm going to be honest with you. I really didn't notice her outfit because all I could think of when I think of Beatrice at the service is just her getting emotional and crying and just how, I mean, you and I were just having this conversation earlier today about how much we miss our grandparents.
Yep.
And the service fell so close to the 1 year anniversary of his passing. It's almost like it might even be even harder because you've had a year now to experience, especially, I mean, Beatrice gave birth, and without her grandfather there. And she got very emotional. We put on our Instagram. I didn't feel it was good taste. I know you would agree with me to put the actual photos of her crying, although those are out there. We put a photo up of her putting her face behind the program of the service. I mean, I thought she looked beautiful, but I just was really moved by her sorrow and her grief.
Yeah, I totally agree. I did see those photos, unfortunately. And it was a very, just genuine sort of moment of grief for her. But I will say, if you go out there and look, there are some other great shots of her, outside where she wasn't crying, and you can see some of her fashion. So, listeners, if you missed that, go check it out.
Mhm.
Saving the best for last, of course, I loved Pretty Little Princess Charlotte's navy outfit. I know you saw that one.
Yeah, she looked beautiful.
She had this knee-length navy coat. There were these like double silver buttons on the front, navy tights, black patent leather flats, and I think I saw a green and navy plaid dress under her coat. She was rocking the middle part. She had pieces of hair pulled back on either side, so just really, really cute. And we've talked a lot about royal kid fashion on our lifestyle segment before. We did a past episode about it, and if you want to go back and listen to that and get some inspiration, do. But it is just fun to see, the really classic, sophisticated style of some of our next generation of royals. So, did you have any other takeaways from the fashion at the service?
Well, I don't think we can talk fashion at that service without talking about Kate.
Of
She
course.
wore that Alessandra Rich black polka dot with that hat that was stunning. Alessandra Rich, if you remember the very last outfit from the Caribbean tour, the yellow one that looked very 80s inspired and didn't
Mhm.
really make a whole lot of sense maybe at the time, but now I kind of get it because um she knew, of course, that she would be wearing that designer in 3 days for the service. And so now it kind of makes sense. But, the yellow look and this black polka dot look have both grown on me as days go on. I will say that Kay was incredibly striking at the service. I mean, she was all eyes on her. I mean, you just can't take your eyes off her. That dress had a slit, the hat, just the whole look. But again, 80s inspired. I mean, maybe we're bringing the 80s back, but I will tell you that look grows on me as it's been a week today since the service, and I would love to know your thoughts on that look because I think that was if there was ever in my opinion a look of the day, just as far as like being eye catching, it would be that one.
Right. Yes. So I actually I intentionally left that one out of my list and I was hoping you would bring it up only because I have talked about Kate's fashion so much the last few weeks. I wanted to kind of
Yeah,
branch out and highlight a few others. But I agree. I sort of had the same reaction as you. I wasn't really sure how I felt about it at first. I mean, my tendency as far as my personal style goes, I don't really gravitate toward polka dots,
same.
um but I've seen the photos several times. I thought she looked great in it. And I agree with you, Rachel. It has grown on me. And I thought it was a really great choice for that event.
Well, and I just, I'm really big into the fashion story, and the Caribbean tour for Kate's part definitely had a fashion story. The one part of it that I didn't understand at the time was that Alessandra Rich yellow look at the end. It just didn't make sense. But
Mhm.
that's what's so cool about Kate is that now it does. Like, we may not see it at the time, but there is so much method to this madness, so much thought put into it. And so now I get it. And so but both of those looks are actually growing on me. But it was, I mean, she looked beautiful. She always does. But yeah, I think that as far as conversation starter, that's the number one for me.
Definitely.
Well, let's do segment two, shall we? We had Jessica's fashion pick. Now we're going to do Rachel's history lesson. So, a really quick history lesson for you on March 30th, 2002, which is inexplicably 20 years ago. I feel like 2002 is not 20 years ago, to say the least. The world lost one of the most beloved members of the royal family, HRH, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She died at 101 and a half years old, just 7 weeks after younger daughter, Princess Margaret. So, for context, Queen Elizabeth II, our current monarch, just for clarification, they're both named Elizabeth, grew up in a family of four: her father, King George VI, her mother, and her sister, Margaret. Of course, if you know anything about the royal family, you know that the four were extremely close. The queen lost two of her three immediate family members inside of 2 months. The last time she lost a member of her immediate family, for perspective, was 50 years prior when her father died in February 1952. So, of course, this was a really rough season for Her Majesty, but 2002 did go on to redeem itself. It was also a Jubilee year for HRH. And on Mothering Sunday this year, if you missed it, that was March 27th, there was an especially poignant photo of the Queen Mother, which was likely in subtle honor of this milestone anniversary of her passing. So there's a little history lesson for you. So, really quickly, before we hop into the royal rundown, and we've got a big one today, I want to mention that Bethan Holt, who is a former guest on our show, she was on in January with us talking about Kate's 40th birthday. Her new book, which we talked about in that interview, but it's finally here. It seemed like months to go at the time, but time flies. So her new book, The Queen, 70 Years of Majestic Style, is out April 19th. This would be a perfect Easter gift or Mother's Day gift for the royal lover in your life. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait to. I loved her first book, which was about Kate.
Yeah, I'm excited for this too. Great reminder.
Thank you.
So We'll get started with the Royal Rundown next. We are going to try a little bit different format this week with the Royal Rundown. So we've divided it into subjects, and we're just going to kind of discuss each of them until we are ready to move on to the next. We've got 5 big topics to cover today. We're going to talk about Jamaica, the Bahamas, Philip's memorial service, of course, Meghan's podcast, and the Queen's British Vogue cover.
But before we get into Jamaica, we do want to recognize both the 1-year anniversary of Philip's death and simultaneously, actually, on the same day, Charles and Camilla's 17-year wedding anniversary. They happen to both fall on April 9th. So that's a mixture of both a happy and sorrowful anniversary.
So we left last episode with the Cambridges getting off the plane in Jamaica. So let's return. We'll go back to the royal tour of the Caribbean. That night, Tuesday, William and Kate played the drums at Bob Marley's house in Trenchtown, Kingston, meeting Jamaican sports stars while they were there. They even hopped on a bobsled. So for all of our fellow 90s kids out there, I think the movie Cool Runnings. They also, appropriately for where they were, learned about the importance of reggae music.
Let me tell you, I need to schedule a showing of Cool Runnings in my life. I haven't seen that movie in a really long time, but they sure did get in that bobsled. So the next day, which was Wednesday, March 23rd, William and Kate met with Jamaica's Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. They were met with a bottle of Jamaican rum, and during their meeting, Holness directly addressed speculation that Jamaica might break away from the British monarchy, saying, quote, "There are issues here, which, as you know, are unresolved, but your presence gives us an opportunity for those issues to be placed in context, to be out front and center, and to be addressed as best we can. But Jamaica as you would see, is a country that is proud of its history and very proud of what we have achieved. And we're moving on. And we intend to fulfill our true ambitions and destiny to become an independent, developed, and prosperous country." So basically saying, in no uncertain terms, they're going to start the process of becoming a republic as well, just like Barbados did before them.
Mm. Well, later on Wednesday, Kate delivered her first and only speech of the tour while on a visit to Shortwood Teacher Training College in Kingston. She said in part, "I truly believe we are on the cusp of one of the biggest opportunities for positive change in generations." Then that night, the Cambridges attended a dinner at King's House, the official residence of the Governor General of Jamaica, Sir Patrick Allen, who represents the Queen. Kate, of course, stunned in that sparkly Jenny Packham green gown we mentioned earlier. And you and I, like you said, we were at dinner when we saw that for the first time. Totally took our breath away. And I didn't mention this earlier, but she also had emerald jewels on loan from the Queen, Her Majesty, that night.
I just think that whole look was impeccable. I mean, just again, breathtaking. But while all eyes were on Kate, it was William's words that stole the show. He said in part, quote, "I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it never should have happened. While the pain runs deep, Jamaica continues to forge its future with determination, courage, and fortitude. The strength and shared sense of purpose of the Jamaican people represented in your flag and motto celebrate an invincible spirit. It is no secret that the Queen has a deep affection for Jamaica, forged on her very first visit here with my grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, in 1953. And likewise, I have been touched to hear today from Jamaicans young and old about their affection for the Queen. She may be my actual grandmother, but everyone counts her as their grandmother too, and I am okay with that." And he concluded, "Catherine and I only wish we had more time to spend with you in Jamaica. There is so much more to learn. I hope this will be one of many visits, and next time we love to bring our children too. Governor General, thank you again for hosting us all tonight. I hope you have a happy evening and one love," which of course is I've heard that said many times. I feel like so in Costa Rica, their country's motto or phrase is Pura Vida, and that I feel one love is one of Jamaica's phrases as well. So okay, that's topic one, Jamaica. I want to discuss Jamaica. So it was heavy. It was really, really heavy. What do you think?
Well, I did want to mention William's speech. I really liked. I thought it was interesting to kind of hear how he approached, a delicate topic. And I especially loved the line where, he mentions everyone can kind of count his actual grandmother as their grandmother too. And I don't know, it felt warm to me and genuine. And I liked it. It stuck out to me. What were your thoughts?
Well, I also like the speech. I thought, it was a huge, huge progressive step forward for the royal family to say words like that. Charles had said similar sentiments when he was in Barbados at their, if you, for a lack of a better term, closing ceremony when they officially. I still find this so bizarre that Charles came down. Basically, it's like a big party for a breakup, and Charles was there when Barbados officially became a republic. It was a very happy occasion for Barbados, but I don't know how that was a happy occasion for the UK and the British royal family. But anyway, a lot of people criticized William's speech. As there's always a critic, right? And a lot of people criticized William's speech, saying that he didn't go far enough. But I will say, and I'm not prone to disagree with that. However, for the precedents that have been set by the royal family, the fact that he's having the conversation is progress. It may not be the full progress that folks want. I hear that and I understand that, but progress is being made. I think that folks expected William to apologize for slavery, just to really go granular in it. But I think that his comments were good. I was impressed with his speech. I think he did a good job. I think that, and we'll talk about this in our closing thoughts on the tour in a moment, I think that William and Kate were faced with a totally impossible situation on this tour.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think some of it, maybe they weren't even really prepared for.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I've heard this comment come up as well. I don't know that it was really his place to go beyond what he said in his speech. What I
He is
mean, at the end
not
of
the
the day,
monarch, and we need to
exactly,
remember that he's
exactly.
not the monarch.
Right, right. And so I don't know that he really should have gone further, honestly.
I thought it was great. I thought that he really moved the needle forward. Progress is being made. Maybe progress isn't happening as quickly as people want it to, but progress is being made. And I was impressed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And I also loved how Kate made that visit to Shortwood Teacher Training College.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was really fitting for her, and I thought that was a really cool event that she fit into the tour.
I agree. So then we move on to topic 2, which they are in the Bahamas closing out this tour.
Yeah, so the Cambridges arrived in the Bahamas in a downpour, and jokingly apologized for bringing the British weather with them. So some highlights from their time there include, Kate gave her second speech of the tour while she was in the Bahamas. William and Kate squared off in a sailing race, and William won this time, by the way. There was a parade and a great shot of Kate eating conch salad at a black tie or in a black tie reception. So Kate dazzled in blue, and William openly addressed the kind of elephant in the room for the whole tour, acknowledging the views of the monarchy are rapidly shifting in the Caribbean countries where the Queen remains head of state. William said, I want to say this. We support with pride and respect your decisions about your future. Relationships evolve, friendship endures.
And I thought that was incredibly nose to the ground and really aware
Mhm.
of what was going on. Because, of course, the royals' famous motto is never complain, never explain. But it shows me that William and Kate and their team are hearing what's being said in the media and by the public at large. And not only are they hearing it, they're doing something about it. I don't know if that speech would have happened in that way. I'm not a fortune teller, but I don't know if that speech would have happened in that way had all the backlash in Belize and Jamaica not happened. And
Mhm.
so I think that it shows that they're malleable, and that they're willing to change course if something goes awry, as a lot of the tour did. So this speech came after a really intense week, honestly. Protests in Belize, of course, we talked about that last episode. Jamaica as well, surrounding colonialism and apologizing and paying reparations for slavery inflicted by the British Empire. So this is the first time that the Cambridges have faced backlash like this on a royal tour. It's certainly their most complex tour ever. I thought they handled themselves with grace and dignity, and their hosts also gave them a warm welcome. But these are tough but necessary conversations. I mean, we walked out of this tour with, I don't think Jamaica was kind of rumbling about becoming a republic, but I don't think I'd heard anything about Belize or the Bahamas. And now I'm hearing rumbles of all three countries looking to remove the queen as head of state. So then the tour ends. And then in a truly unprecedented landmark move, William released a statement proving once again that he and Kate are attuned and listening to voices on the ground. He said, "Foreign tours are an opportunity to reflect. You learn so much. What is on the minds of prime ministers, the hopes and ambitions of school children, the day-to-day challenges faced by families and communities. I know that this tour has brought into even sharper focus questions about the past and the future. In Belize, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, that future is for the people to decide upon." Like, if I can bold and underline that, that would be where I would bold and underline. Back to him. "But we have thoroughly enjoyed spending time with communities in all three countries, understanding more about the issues that matter most to them. Catherine and I are committed to service. For us, that's not telling people what to do. It is about serving and supporting them in whatever way they think best by using the platform we are lucky to have. It is why tours such as this reaffirm our desire to serve the people of the Commonwealth and to listen to communities around the world. Who the Commonwealth chooses to lead its family in the future isn't what's on my mind. What matters to us is the potential the Commonwealth family has to create a better future for the people who form it, and our commitment to serve and support as best we can." So forgive me for reading that whole statement, but I read it in full because it is so landmark and so unprecedented. Because I have never, excuse the sirens in the background if you can hear those, I have never, ever seen, first of all, a response like this to a tour. Definitely not seen it so soon. So I think that's some powerful stuff and a great preview of how he will lead as king someday. I was impressed. More it wasn't a perfect tour, but I was impressed with William and Kate all the way around. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think we're really seeing William these past few years, especially step up and really sort of grow into his role and his future. Leading the monarchy, and I think I do think it's a glimpse into what we'll continue to see from him. And I think what really stuck out to me was him talking about, him and Catherine being committed to service, and really focusing on the potential the Commonwealth family has to create a better future for the people who form it, and to serve it the best we can. And that, I think that's what, you and I have kind of hit on in the past when we talked about how it felt sort of sad to hear countries wanting to step away because they've all had such a wonderful relationship with Her Majesty. And it does feel like this sort of family or community of countries working together for a common good.
Yeah, and I just appreciate that, he flat out said, "We're not trying to tell you what to do with your country." I love that line, that relationships evolve, but friendship endures. No matter what these countries choose, it sounds like William, Kate, and the entire British monarchy will be in their corner. And that's kind of the same thing. I mean, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me when Charles went down to Barbados for that ceremony, but I mean, it shows the same thing, is that they support whatever these countries choose to do as long as that's what is best for them. And maybe a lot of people are calling the tour a bust, but maybe it was actually a resounding success, not necessarily for the British monarchy, but for these countries, because they are empowered to do what is best for them. And so in that case, maybe it was actually one of the more successful tours, and it might not have looked like that or felt like that while it was happening. But if needed change comes out of it, then maybe it was actually really successful in that regard. There's a lot here, and we're going to share our final thoughts on the tour. But do you have any other thoughts on the Bahamas specifically?
No, I mean, I think you covered it really well, and honestly, I think his speech kind of hits on a lot as well. I'll go ahead and let you share your final thoughts, and then I'll share some.
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Sure, go ahead.
So we really try to be thoughtful, and we try not to just wing it on the show. I mean, obviously, we're telling our real true thoughts in real time as we talk, but we both sat down and wrote out some final thoughts on the Caribbean tour as a whole. And so forgive me if this sounds like a monologue, but these are my organized thoughts, and then we can break them down if need be about the tour, because it's a lot. I mean, it's a big news item. There's a lot to it. And so here are my final thoughts on the tour. So there's no doubt that, in a word, the Caribbean tour was complex. Honestly, I am glad we're currently at Podcast Royal on a cadence of recording every other week, because I needed this past week to digest and unpack this tour. On its surface, Kate wore beautiful clothes. There were precedent breaking, needed speeches made and words said. And it appeared as though the Cambridges had a good time getting along with locals and enjoying three places it's really honestly quite difficult not to enjoy: Belize, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. So last week, I posted a collage on our Instagram of 4 looks Kate wore on this tour, with the words "living for this tour" splayed across them. So then I started corresponding with a really kind listener of our show. Her name is Ria, who really educated me that this tour is problematic for really deep reasons. In her words, she said, quote, "I find this whole tour distasteful and tone deaf for the following reasons. We have just come out of the pandemic, but countries like Jamaica have not yet. So therefore, the trip should not have gone ahead at this time." She then pointed out that the imagery of William and Kate in Jamaica standing in the white truck screams colonial empire Britain. This was tone deaf, she said, after the poor statement made by William the day before. This is her speaking, not me, but I don't disagree with her, which the same words I applauded on our Instagram, where he said slavery is abhorrent. We just talked about this, but words that to others who maybe aren't white, as I am, lacked an outright apology. Ria told me that this tour could have been so much different if the Cambridges had more than just a white team around them. And as a white person myself, I can tell you Ria's words really opened my own eyes to some things I'd never thought about. So Ria sent me some links to check out. I read every one of them. One piece in The Guardian by David Olusoga said of the royal family, quote, "Like so many British institutions, they are trapped in a fantasy version of Britain's past." So Queen Elizabeth, who I adore, has been on the throne for 70 years. This is not news to anybody listening to this podcast. Much has changed in 70 years, but the monarchy more or less runs at its core the way it did in 1952. The Cambridge's Caribbean tour, Caribbean, tomato, tomato, whatever, I've said it different ways throughout this episode, was in honor of Her Majesty the Queen. Basically, as I said earlier, an impossible task given to William and Kate to simultaneously honor the past 70 years while also look forward to the future when they will be on the throne. So as I combed through so many pieces denouncing the tour as tone deaf, in particular that moment in the truck in Jamaica, and then of course the infamous photo of the Cambridges grabbing hands through a fence, also in Jamaica, where I admit those optics are terrible, I asked myself, who sent them here? How could they not know what they were walking into, especially after Barbados just removed Her Majesty as head of state? And then meanwhile, juxtaposed against this, Charles and Camilla, who are the immediate heirs to the crown, are dancing and pouring beers and having a good old time in Ireland for a tour of their own. But William and Kate were sent because they are the future. I mean, yes, Charles is the next monarch, but he was born in 1948, even before the Queen became Queen in 1952. He's old guard. As one royal expert said in a piece I read in People this week, the future belongs to the Cambridges. And what the future looks like is uncertain. After this tour, Jamaica and possibly Belize as well, and now I've heard the Bahamas, have started movements to remove the Queen as head of state. We've talked about this. I mean, we've talked about this multiple times on the show before. We've talked about this probably at least 5 times, but it really does look like the term queen or king, whatever, what have you, of the world will never be seen again. And for the first time, I'm coming to terms with the fact that it's okay. The way we've done things forever doesn't mean it's the way we should do things forever. Maybe not talking about politics, which is the reason given for never discussing slavery, colonialism, etc., isn't the way to go. All I know is this as I wrap up my monologue here, I hope we can all learn from this Caribbean tour. I know my eyes have been opened. I come from, my paradigm, and my paradigm isn't everyone's paradigm. I'm beginning to realize that more and more. Maybe this is what we, the royal family and the world, needed to stop focusing on superficiality, which, look, y'all know me well enough by now. As much as I love a good fashion discussion or a rundown of the day's events, maybe the British monarchy can turn into a really substantive voice for Britain and the world. I mean, I see so much potential with William after this tour, and Kate too, but William being the monarch, I see so much potential here. Maybe this is the dawn of a new era, which many bemoan, but maybe can be wonderful. I hope so. I really hope so. And maybe the tour isn't what we wanted, but maybe it's what we needed to usher in the future of the monarchy, which of course is, I hope, is long and vast. So stepping off my soapbox now, and I want to hear your final thoughts on the tour.
Well, I loved your thoughts, Rachel. I thought they were it was a very interesting perspective, and I think you did a great job researching all different sides of this and taking a deeper look into it. I will say mine are pretty short and sweet. And to our listeners, I had not read Rachel's final thoughts before just putting some quick thoughts down about the tour from my perspective. And so they're a little bit different. So
And that's okay too.
It totally is. And
this show, I have to say something really quick. A lot of people, especially the British tabloids, call us royal experts. Jessica, we're not experts in this. We're correspondents. We are commentators. We present the facts, but we have opinions, and it's our opinion. Sometimes Jessica and I will differ, and sometimes we won't. But every opinion deserves to be heard.
Definitely. And a lot of, the stuff that we get, we don't work side by side by the royals. So we don't see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. A lot of what we get is from, reading the news like everyone else and learning the best that we can about, what went on. So, real quick, I actually thought that this tour was a moment of excitement and royal tradition that, we've been missing the past few years. Yeah, we are coming out of a pandemic, and, the world has to go on at some point. We've got to make the most of the time that we have. And I thought that they did an incredible job from, connecting with locals to, again, William's thoughtful and genuine speech. They made efforts to honor the culture and the wishes of the country they were visiting, I felt like. You talked about the truck or the Jeep ride in Jamaica. And again, I wasn't there, but I've listened to others talk on this and other reports that have come out. And, it sounded to me like that was a specific request from Jamaica. And so
I've heard that as well.
I think they were doing their best to honor some of those traditions and requests. Again, I thought Kate nailed it with her fashion. They mixed in some really formal meetings with really fun activities, and they made time to meet and talk about children. So I've been thinking lately that we are in a unique situation in the world right now. For some reason, people, the media, are constantly looking to attack others, or they're looking for a reason to be offended so easily. And I really just don't think it's fair that the Cambridges had to be the target of that. I don't think that I think they were going in here with genuine intentions, and I think they were doing their best to really be a light, a bright light in, what we've come out of 2 really hard years. And again, like, I think if we dig a little bit deeper under the surface, there's not really always a lot of substance to some of the claims that were being made. So I think they came from this at a good place. They took a lot of time away from their kids at home. They made an effort to work with the countries they visited and meet their individual preferences. So, again, I listened to the commentary around the tour from a lot of different angles. And lately, to me, I think people love to hate too much right now.
Mm.
And I'm not saying, I am open to listening to other perspectives, and I'm not saying that everything was perfect or right, and that there was nothing to be learned at all. But this has just been, to me, what feels like a continuing narrative of let's point out everything wrong, that they do all the time. And I don't really think that's fair. So I'm going to be the one here to say, great job to the Cambridges for their hard work, and what I thought was a really fun tour to follow along with.
Look, and I think it was, as I said, a completely impossible situation to simultaneously go on tour to honor the past 70 years while also looking forward to the next 70. That's a tough line to walk. And I have to tell you, I'm really glad we had a week to kind of marinate on this, because I was as conflicted about this as I was about the Oprah interview, if you'll believe that.
Hmm.
Um, there's just a lot to take in and a lot to process, and I'm still processing it. It's only been a week or so. But I thought that William and Kate did the best they possibly could with an impossible situation. I am proud to call them, I'm not British, but I mean, I love the royal family. So do you. I'm proud to call them the future of the monarchy. And I think the monarchy is in really, really great hands with the two of them. Meanwhile, I mean, no shade or not huge shade. Meanwhile, Charles and Camilla are pouring beers and dancing in Ireland. I mean, definitely the Cambridges got the tougher assignment, and they handled it with grace, I
Yeah,
thought.
for sure. And I think they showed us, that they were listening on this tour, and they were responding
Exactly.
to concerns, or to the the thoughts of others, and they did it the best that they could. And I don't think it's fair to continue to attack them for a lot of things that were just out of their control. And I do think we're going to continue to see the royals evolve. And I mean, that's happened over time. Sometimes it's happened slower, sometimes it's happened a little bit faster, but I think they will continue to do that. And I really do feel like William and Catherine make great leaders.
Completely. And I want to say one more thing before we move on to topic 3. I wish that we could dialogue more like Rhea and I did, rather than just being so vitriolic to one another. Because I put up a picture of William, and I said that I thought his speech was powerful, or whatever I said on Instagram. She did not agree with me. So you know what we did? We took it off of the comments of the picture, and we started conversing on private messaging on DM. And I learned so much. I was open to learning, she was open to teaching, and it was great.
Mm.
And I feel like my perspective has changed, and we didn't have to bicker with each other. We didn't have to call each other names and argue. We just had a conversation. And that is what I want for everyone, is to stop pointing fingers, stop making accusations, and just, listen to one another, learn from one another. And I was really inspired by my interaction with her. And I'll never forget that. And, I think that we all need and deserve to treat each other with respect as we move through really difficult stuff in the royal family, whether it's the Oprah interview or Andrew or this tour. Let's just all have a baseline of respect and go from there.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think it's a great time for us to share all of our different perspectives with each other, and to talk about it, and do so in a respectful way.
Because you and I might be on the mic here, but never once have we claimed to have all the answers. In fact, if you go back to episode 1, we literally say, this is not going to be a perfect podcast. We don't have all the answers. We're just starting the conversation. So thank you to my new friend Rhea, and for all of those who write into us. But we just ask that you do it respectfully. There's so much, you will just get so much farther in life with respect than with vitriol. So, are we ready to close the Caribbean tour?
I think so.
I think we did. I think I'm not tuning our own horn, but I think that was pretty balanced and as balanced and honest as we could possibly be. So we're going to move into topic 3 now, which is Philip's memorial service. It was a week ago from when we are recording right now on Tuesday, April 5th. It was up in the air for a minute if Her Majesty was going to be able to make it to the service because of comfort issues. We are happy to report that she was in attendance at Philip's service of Thanksgiving on March 29th. Obviously, she never wavered in her want to be there, but there were, as I said, some issues surrounding her comfort being a possible prohibitor to her attending. But she was there and apparently insisted on being escorted by son Andrew, which I don't agree with, but I'm also not Her Majesty. The service was quite emotional. I actually got emotional seeing Her Majesty there. And in a surprise appearance, Prince George and Princess Charlotte attended and were able to do so because they were on their Easter break from school. And Louis at 3 was deemed just a little bit too young to attend.
So, as a refresher, the service of Thanksgiving took place to honor and pay tribute to the life of the Duke of Edinburgh, specifically from the numerous charities and patronages he's worked with throughout his long life. His funeral in April of 2021 was limited to just 30 people because of COVID, and it was mostly family. So we're quickly nearing the 1-year anniversary of his death, which really seems impossible to believe, doesn't it, Rachel?
Yeah, it does. I remember when he died and we got on the mic and recorded like a 1 minute, really brief episode. And it just really felt kind of like all of our collective grandfather had died. And at the service, poignant musical selections and floral arrangements were inspired by the Queen and Philip's wedding ceremony. So the service of Thanksgiving was at Westminster Abbey. Of course, that's where Philip and the Queen, she was then Princess Elizabeth, were married in 1947. As ever, Her Majesty is an example for us all. I don't think hell or high water could have kept her away from honoring the love of her life. I can't imagine how much pain she was probably in if she's still having back issues. I myself have back issues and I'm not 95 and it can really be debilitating. By the way, many noticed, as you said, Her Majesty was wearing green and not black. You already touched on this, but of course that's because the color is called Edinburgh green. And so, just from I said all of us at Podcast Royal, like there's not 2 of us, but from both of us at Podcast Royal, may you continue to rest in peace, Prince Philip. We miss you. I know the family misses you and God bless you.
Definitely.
So any other thoughts on the service? I was really moved by Beatrice and her emotions. We saw really almost everyone get emotional. We saw the Queen dab a tear, Charles. Of course, the headline has been all about Andrew, but I'm not doing that. Like, if you're okay with that, I'm not playing in that pond with Andrew. I don't want to make everything about Andrew. He was there. It wasn't our decision. It was the Queen's. She made it, but that day was about Philip. And
I think that's a good point. I think, let's keep the focus on what the focus was supposed to be on. And I thought it was really great to see so many royals together to celebrate his life. It was a touching service. And we talked about some of the statements they made with their fashion, but it was nice to see them come together and be able to honor him again.
absolutely. So let's move into topic 4. Meghan's podcast has a name. So more details are emerging about Meghan's forthcoming Spotify podcast, which we mentioned on the show last episode. A trailer was released on March 24th for Archetypes, the new podcast from Archewell Audio hosted by Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. The podcast title, of course, is a play on the name of Meghan and Harry's nonprofit Archewell, and will be a place, quote, where we dissect, explore, and subvert the labels that try to hold women back, Meghan says in the trailer, which was released exclusively on Spotify. I'll have conversations with women who know all too well how these typecasts shape our narratives, and I'll talk to historians to understand how we even got here in the first place, she says. So no firm release date has been announced yet. We do know it will hit airwaves in summer 2022. She asked on the show's trailer, Meghan does, "This is how we talk about women, the words that raise our girls and how the media reflects women back to us. But where do these stereotypes come from and how do they keep showing up and defining our lives?" So what are your thoughts?
Well, as I said last time, I'll say it again. I think it's really too soon for me to form a true opinion on this podcast, just without hearing, the guests and their perspectives and without clearly understanding what Meghan's ultimate goal is with the podcast. I think it's hard to say. Is it something that you're looking forward to? I feel like it definitely is.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you're right. We don't know much about it. We know the name, which is exciting, and we have about a minute-ish trailer for the
Right.
show. Um, you know what people are saying? This is probably like talk about like I'm really good at this by this point, overanalyzing what Meghan does and specifically what she wears, but people are going crazy that Meghan specifically mentioned the phrase all too well in the trailer. And so they're thinking that Taylor Swift is going to be on the show. Of course, all too well is a Taylor Swift song. I'm not
Sure,
a
I
huge
heard that. Yeah.
I'm not I'm like, y'all are reading a little bit too much into this. I mean, that would be interesting if she did show up because actually she would fit in with the premise of the show. But yeah, I'm really excited to see more. I'm an avid podcast listener. I listen to podcasts all the time and I will tear this show up. I mean, I can't wait to see what she does. Of course, I'm happy as all get out to see movement on the Archwell audio front. And so more to come.
Yeah, we'll check it out and we'll hopefully have some more thoughts in the next couple of months.
I wonder if Harry's doing his own show or where's Harry in this? So I'm sure Harry's got something in the works on his own, but Archetypes coming your way this summer. I'm ready for it.
All right. Well, that will lead us into our last topic of the Royal Rundown, topic 5, the Queen on the cover of British Vogue. So, Her Majesty the Queen is one of 2 cover stars on the April issue of British Vogue. The other actress is Anya Taylor-Joy. So, how intimidating would it be to share CoverGirl status with the Queen?
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to do that. I wouldn't want to be the other cover star.
Well, each woman has her own cover. The April issue just has 2 different covers being released for whatever reason. Anyway, surprisingly, though, Princess Diana appeared on the cover of the magazine in 1990, and the Duchess of Cambridge did the same in 2016. So this is the Queen's first British Vogue cover. And in
Which
this
that's
issue,
surprising to me. That's shocking to me.
yeah, totally. Me too. But this issue stands on March 29th, and it celebrates the Queen's reign and her Platinum Jubilee this year, as well as the magazine's, quote, unique relationship with the monarch.
I just find it really bizarre that she's never been on the cover until now. That seems really hard to believe. So we put a photo of it on our Instagram, but her cover shot is a black and white portrait from her early years on the throne. And like Jessica said, Diana's been on the cover, Kate's been on the cover, now the Queen's been on the cover. But in addition to that, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie were interviewed in the magazine. And of course, Meghan famously guest edited the September 2019 issue, the magazine's first guest editor ever, in fact. So, I mean, I say, look, let the Queen be the only cover star. I would not want to be Anya Taylor-Joy. For listeners who don't know that name necessarily, she's the star of the Queen's Gambit. I wouldn't want to be the other cover. I wouldn't want to compete with the Queen. We'll just say that. But that's just me.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. If anyone deserves their own cover, I think it's Her Majesty. So, my first thoughts on this was, it was a beautiful photo of the Queen. And like you, I was really surprised it was her first cover photo for British Vogue. And I would really love to know her thoughts on that. I mean, I wonder if she had any input or any comments when she found out that they were going to put her on the cover.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, Rachel. So, what are your thoughts on the 2 cover photos if you've seen them? We've got the one with Her Majesty, with this sort of traditional older photo, and then we've got the one with Anya Taylor-Joy, who's got this sort of like, it's the same crown. Of course, it's a replica of Her Majesty's, but it's kind of tilted on her head, and so she's kind of doing this sort of queen look too. Did you see both of the covers?
Yeah, and again, I just don't want to be Anya Taylor-Joy in this moment, like trying to compete with the Queen. Like I almost wonder if like when they shot that, did Anya Taylor-Joy know that like, hey, you're gonna mimic Queen Elizabeth in this photo, and like y'all's covers are coming out at the same time? Or did
Yeah.
she think she was just putting a crown on her head for a fashion shoot? I don't know. Again, I just don't want to be in, it's not that it's a competition, but like I don't know. I think it's, I mean, I think it ties it all up with the bow, but let the queen have her own cover. Like let her be the only one. I think she's more than capable of selling magazines.
Well, I had a lot of those same questions too. I will say I did like Anya Taylor-Joy's cover photo. I thought she, looked really pretty in the photo, and
Sure.
it was a great sort of a playful look. But I was wondering kind of where they were coming from. It was like, okay, had they did they plan to have all of their cover models, for this year in advance? And then someone was like, oh no, we forgot about the Platinum Jubilee. We got to, pick a month, did it play out like that? And then they said, well, let's make them kind of both have the same crown, or was this long, played out in advance?
Mm.
Is she supposed to be sort of like the Anya Taylor-Joy? Is she like the young rebellious version with the crooked crown? I don't know. I had all these different questions going on. But both of the covers are really pretty. I do wish that they had allowed Her Majesty to have one all to herself though for her
Yeah.
70th.
I love Anya Taylor-Joy. I love the Queen's Gambit. Put her in May. Put her in the month of May. We'll just call it good. I mean, magazines are doing that a lot lately, because I'll see, on the internet, like so and so is on the cover of such and such magazine, and then I'll get it in my mailbox because I subscribe to, like, I don't know, a million different magazines, and it's not that cover because there's like 4 different versions of the magazine for that month, and I just don't really understand that. But
Hmm.
I don't know. That's probably above my pay grade, but I need to. So I've got a copy of Meghan's September 2019 British Vogue. It took a long time to get here. I need to. The British Vogue is out now, so it came out March 29th. So I need to get my hands on a copy. So listeners, if you have any hookups for that, I remember ordering it through some website. I can't remember. I'll probably end up doing that again, but I will happily Venmo you for your postage. And so just let me know. You know how to get a hold of us. We say it at the end of every episode. So yeah, that'll for sure be a collector's item. So I'm going to have to get my hands on it. All right. Well, we're on segment 4. That was a big royal rundown. That was a lot, but we did have a lot to cover. It was the tour. So, rather brief royals around the world segment. So, some news out of Jordan. We don't talk about the Jordanian royal family very often, but Prince Hamza bin Hussein, who is the son of the late King Hussein and Queen Noor. Queen Noor, by the way, is one of my favorite royals around the world. Prince Hamza is the former heir to Jordan's throne. I'll explain what that means in a second. But he announced over Twitter on Sunday that he was giving up his title of prince. He wrote, following what I have witnessed in recent years, I have come to the conclusion that my personal convictions, which my father instilled in me and which I tried hard in my life to adhere to, are not in line with the approaches, trends, and modern methods of our institutions. Okay, so follow me here. The Windsors are not the only ones with drama. I think we've long established that in our royals around the world segment. So, okay, at one point, Hamza was the direct heir to the Jordanian throne. So, Hamza's father died in 1999. Then, at that time in 1999, Hamza's elder brother, Prince Abdullah bin Hussein, ascended to the throne. So, after Abdullah ascended to the throne, it was made known that King Hussein wanted Hamza to follow Abdullah's reign. So at one point, Hamza was the direct heir to the throne. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
So then in 2004, 5 years after Hussein's death, Abdullah, the older brother, removed Hamza as the heir to the throne. For 5 years, from 2004 to 2009, no successor was named in Hamza's place. But it's thought that Abdullah removed Hamza in favor of Abdullah's own son, Prince Hussein. I know this is very confusing, and I researched this copiously. So that happened in 2009. So again, it's confusing. Not only the Windsors have drama, so now Hamza is not only not the direct heir to the throne, but he's given up his princely title entirely. So there
Well,
you
I mean, I can sort of understand where he's coming from. I mean, I feel like he, you know, feels like he kind of got his, was sort of taken out of the line of succession. It was sort of stolen from him, I guess. Maybe he might feel that
Well,
way. I don't
it even goes deeper than that. I mean, we're just scratching the surface on the brotherly drama. I mean, talk about brotherly drama in this family. There's a lot of moving parts here, but he has officially renounced his princely title. So he's done. So there's we don't talk about Jordan very much, even though I really love Queen Noor. So I thought that was pretty shocking when I read that, but he's done, no longer a prince.
Wow. So, also in a rare royal crossover, Prince Charles and Queen Letizia of Spain undertook a joint event together in the UK today, Tuesday, to view a new exhibition of Spanish art by Francisco de Zurbarán at England's Auckland Castle. Letizia is actually one of our favorite royals, and we talk about her quite a lot in royals around the world, especially from a fashion perspective.
Yeah, she's beautiful. And it was cool. Of course, speaking of royals around the world, a lot of royals from around the world were at Philip's Memorial, and I liked to see that. I like that a lot. So, well, that's a pretty short royals around the world. We certainly made up for it in the royal rundown. And we have the first of 4 back to back to back to back, like just grade A, amazing interviews. Our first up is Robert Hardman. You will love this chat. We're going to hop right on in. Jessica said it at the top of the show, but he wrote a 730-page biography of the Queen, and it's a must read. Take a listen.
Her Majesty has been on the throne for 70 years, will soon turn 96, and will mark her Platinum Jubilee this summer. What a life she has lived. And it's all chronicled in Robert Hardman's brilliant Queen of Our Times, The Life of Elizabeth II. Robert is a British royal family expert, if there ever was one, working as a royal correspondent for the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail, a documentary filmmaker for 9 films all about the British royal family, and is the author of 4 books, 1 about the monarchy and 3 exclusively about the Queen. We are thrilled to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very glad to be here.
We are so pleased to have you here with us. So you open the book, which I just said to you offline is 730 pages, the US edition anyway, of compelling content. You open the book by writing, moreover, after all these years of familiarity, we are still left asking the question, what is she, of course, the Queen, really like? Well, there's a good place to start if there ever was one. So from your copious research, what is Her Majesty really like?
She is extraordinary. She is a one-off, both in British history and I suppose in world history, really, because almost no other head of state has been in the same job for 70 years. Couple of exceptions. Louis XIV of France, actually, he reigned for slightly longer, but he did start as a boy king, and of course it was a very different world back then. But no, she has been this phenomenal figure, and yet, as I say, there is this sort of mystique about her. She's probably the most recognizable woman on earth, the most famous woman on earth. Her face has been reproduced more times than anybody else's on coins and banknotes and stamps. And she manages to remain still relevant to us today. I always think that one of the great challenges to monarchy in the modern era is relevance. A lot of people say, well, what on earth is the point of a sort of hereditary institution like this? And yet she is very relevant. She's very present in the lives of people in Britain, but in many other countries too. And it's really been interesting talking to world leaders who are fellow heads of state or some of her prime ministers, people who know what it's like to be in the public eye and to have to make big decisions and to represent their nations. And they're all, without exception, extremely in awe of her, really. And I just think the fact that that this institution, it's been going for 1,000 years, and I think many people over the years might have predicted that it would come to a halt at some point, but it's still going strong. So and I hope over the 730 pages there's lots of new examples, revelations. There's sort of light and shade. It's certainly not been an easy ride for her. I mean, there've been a lot of turbulent periods. It hasn't all been, one success after another. She's made some mistakes, like we all do. But overall, I just think it's an extraordinary life.
How did the 1-2 punch of her uncle's abdication and World War II affect her younger years?
That's a very good question. I think it completely shaped the way she approaches the job, and shaped her character too. I mean, let's remember that this is someone who wasn't born to be queen, in the same way her father wasn't born to be king. It happened after Uncle David, who became king as King Edward VIII, didn't last long, and decided that his personal, his love life came before the throne. And so he abdicated, of course, in 1936, and suddenly you've got this child who suddenly realizes, oh my goodness, daddy's now becoming king, and that means probably I'm going to be queen. And it was a period of great uncertainty for the institution, and particularly for this young family, very close family. And then in very short order, suddenly along comes the war. And I was very lucky when I was writing this that the Queen gave me access to the Royal Archives. Wow. To a lot of papers that hadn't been seen properly before, or been seen very occasionally by academics, but certainly most of which hadn't been published, which are the King's war diaries. And on the day that the war started, the King began this very candid diary. He was, as we know, he was quite a shy man. I mean, many of your listeners will have seen that film, The King's Speech, and he's someone who was quite private. And yet he started this diary because he just wanted to have a sort of record of his thoughts and all the facts and figures as well, of the war. And it goes on. And he goes on beyond the war, actually. He carried on writing it really up until the end of 1946. And it's extensive. It's 11 volumes. And I was lucky enough to be able to go through all of it. And I think when you see the pressures and the uncertainty on this man as he finds himself leading his country at what is unquestionably, the darkest hour in its history. I mean, for many moments, it looks as though Britain at any moment will be invaded and will cease to exist, and not just Britain as well. He's still the king. He's the king emperor. The British Empire is still going. There are moments when large chunks of his empire look like they're going to be overrun, and this is incredibly stressful. And you're sort of going through day to day, and of course, with hindsight, we know what's coming down the track. We know that victory will eventually prevail, but it certainly didn't feel like that in the summer of 1940, as basically Europe just fell, and you had the Germans sweeping across, heading for the Channel. And European monarchs all fleeing to Britain. They all suddenly start arriving at Buckingham Palace. There's a rather interesting section in the diaries where the king reports being woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning by the Queen of Holland saying, "Look, please help. Can you send more ships, send more planes?" And there's nothing you can do. You've got the German paratroopers landing in Holland, with orders to kidnap the royal family. You've got the Dutch royal family trying to escape, and they do escape. They manage to get on a British warship, and the Queen arrives, comes off this British destroyer, and literally all she's got are the clothes on her back and a tin hat. That's it. The king writes about going and picking her up and taking her to the palace, and how upset she is, and all this is going on in the middle of waiting for this invasion that seems imminent. Suddenly, the king starts thinking about, well, what do I do with my daughters? Because a lot of wealthy families around the world have decided by now that wealthy families in Britain have decided to evacuate their children to the United States and to Canada. And that's a very real thought. It's always been said, the history books always say, oh, There was never any question of the royals leaving the country. But actually what we find in the diaries is that the king very seriously thought about getting his daughters out of harm's way. And in that perilous summer of 1940, he writes about how he goes to see Churchill to say, look, I really think we should think about evacuating. He writes about E and M, Elizabeth and Margaret. And Churchill is quite firm and says, well, no, not right now. I don't think we need to do that. And then he writes a few weeks later that he wants to do, he's still thinking about it. But clearly it was Churchill's view that this was not wise or necessary. That royalty belonged, but that their place was at home, and that's where they stayed. So there's a very much a sort of a very human side to this man, and I think at the moment, particularly at a time when the world is united in its admiration for President Zelensky of Ukraine in his darkest hour, and there've been quite a lot of parallels drawn between him and Winston Churchill. And he's obviously addressed parliaments around the world on this. But I can see strong similarities between Zelensky and George III. You've got this sort of dogged, stoical, resilient figure who can't promise miracles, but who all he can do is lead by example. And promises people that he'll do his best, and so it goes on, and you read about the day the palace is dive bombed, and the king and queen actually see two bombs come and land in the quadrangle right below them, and they dash for the doorway, and all the windows blow in, and he writes in his diary how he just says, I can't imagine why we're not dead, but then he writes very honestly. He says, I shouldn't be writing this down, but he writes about how basically how shaken he is, how he can't sit still, he can't read, he can't concentrate, he's constantly looking out of the window, and you're reading basically of someone who's suffering from shock, from sort of shell shock, but can't say so, can't let the public know that. So the only people who really knew that were the close family, and so when you see what the Queen was going through as a young girl, and the strains that she saw her father go through, and how he handled this, and how ultimately he won. I think that has had a profound impact on her life. And as I say in the book, I think there have been two absolutely key influences, which were her father and her husband, Prince Philip, when it comes to reigning, and obviously her mother as a notable figure in her life.
Well, I just don't see how those two events in her younger years, the abdication and then of course the war right after that, or pretty close to after that, wouldn't have shaped her. And of course it did. And by the way, I just want to insert here that access that you had for writing this book is incredible. And that's why I really want to confidently say that there have been many biographies written about Her Majesty. I truly believe that this is going to be the biography of Her Majesty. This is the work on her life.
That's very kind of you. I don't. I mean, I'll leave it for others to judge that. But I mean, it's been a great journey. Getting here, and I was very honoured and pleased when I was allowed to look at these papers, because all the papers that concern the current reign, her reign, they're off limits until a future reign. That's always the way it works. But it was very good to be able to see some of these formative years, and some other papers as well. I mean, there's a charming correspondence between the Windsor librarian and Queen Mary, the present Queen's grandmother, all about what they were doing with the crown jewels during the war, how they were hiding them, hiding all the treasures, and they actually were digging out a new tunnel. They found an old medieval siege tunnel going out from Windsor Castle, and they dug another tunnel off that tunnel, and put all the crowns and scepters and everything in boxes in there, and then took all the jewels out of the crowns and put them in a jam jar, which they put in a biscuit tin, so that if they needed to get away in a hurry, they could just literally pick up the world's greatest collection of jewels. I mean, several of the world's largest diamonds, rubies, you name it, and they were all going to be in this biscuit tin that could just sort of be spirited away at short notice. So I mean, it's a fascinating insight. I mean, it just when you read it, you're reading about another world, another time, And yet she was there, and she's still here today. And that I think that link with history is just remarkable.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I completely agree. And, I was stunned to read in the book that, as you write, the most traveled monarch in history never ventured beyond British waters until the age of 20. You just can't imagine that. And so, while on a Commonwealth tour, the then Princess Elizabeth, you write, had a powerful and permanent effect on the way in which Princess Elizabeth viewed her destiny. Of course, this is the tour where she, in part, goes to South Africa. She gives this beautiful speech that I have chills and goosebumps as I'm even thinking about saying her words. I will never do them justice, but I'm sure any lover of the monarchy can hear her saying these words. She says, "I declare before," I get like I don't know why this phrase is. I've choked up on this phrase many times on this show. I don't know how it's to me, because it's just so powerful, and so few people anymore regard duty the way she does. But I'm going to try and get through this sentence. "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service." She's kept that promise. Why did this tour in particular, this is in 1947, I believe, have such a profound effect on her?
Well, you read it beautifully, Rachel. Well done. I mean, you're in very good company, by the way. When Winston Churchill heard those words being broadcast on the radio in London, he burst into tears himself.
I know, I'm on the verge right now, because it's just she meant them so. You can feel how much she means them as she says them, and she's kept that promise. What, 75 years on?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, those words were as important as her coronation oath. I mean, they were. She was essentially, as you say, just dedicating her life to the duty that lay ahead, and no one could possibly say that she hasn't stuck to that. And to be doing that for 70, well, as you say, 75 years. She's been on the throne for 70 years, but even before she came to the throne, a lot of the time her father was getting progressively more unwell and weaker, and so she and her young husband, because later, after that same year she made that speech, of course she got married, and as a young couple they were fulfilling that promise, and it is, when you stand back and by any measure of public service, it's just an extraordinary span of time, but I think that trip, yes, it is bizarre, really, in today's world, that this extraordinary globetrotter, if you like, who's visited well over 120 countries and many times, and has traveled further than all previous monarchs put together, but that she didn't leave the country till the age of 20. It was partly because in those days people didn't travel as much. People, went on vacation at home. She spent all her summer holidays at Balmoral. It's partly because of the war. But after the war, the British Empire was sort of coming to a close. But the king wanted to go and thank the people in, not just in South Africa, but in Rhodesia as well, where thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen had come to Britain's side in the war. So it was very much a sort of thank you, and it was also to try and shore up support for the crown in South Africa, where the forces that would ultimately lead to the introduction of apartheid were starting to gather pace, and he was trying to stop that. And so this visit had a strong underlying political dimension, and that didn't work. What did work, though, was introducing his daughter to the people of the Commonwealth and to the job that lay ahead, and it had a profound, as I say in the book, it had a profound effect on her, just seeing that, I think, getting the sense that I'm not just going to be Queen of Britain, I'm going to be Queen of this extraordinary family of nations all over the world.
Princess Elizabeth married in 1947, and by 1950 had 2 young children. You write that these years from 1947 to ascending the throne in 1952, including she and Prince Philip's time in Malta, were some of the happiest of her life. Why is that?
Well, that was the period, Jessica, when she had, I suppose, she was sort of free to, she was free of the palace in a sense. She was in charge of her own life and her own arrangements, but didn't have the pressures of being monarch just yet. And she adored it. She loved. She was thrilled to be married to Prince Philip. She had these two young children, and I mean, it was a very different world of nannies and nurseries. And I mean, for quite a lot of the time, she would go off to Malta, where Prince Philip was stationed in the Navy, and she would leave the children behind. I don't think people would do that these days, but that was, you know, what happened at that time. And so Prince Charles and Princess Anne spent a lot of their very youngest years, you know, months at a time, with their grandparents while the Queen was out with Prince Philip. And she just, I think it was just being able to get up in the morning and just decide what she was going to do that day, not have everything locked into a diary months in advance, not have to worry about red carpets and greeting lines. You know, she had a little sports car that she just used to drive around Malta on her own. And she began to shop, use money. I mean, all these things that we all take for granted. For a princess in the 1940s, late 40s and early 50s, that was pretty unusual. And I think it was a moment of just, you know, not really leading a normal life. I don't think royalty can ever lead a truly normal life, but it was as near to normality perhaps as she's ever got. And then suddenly all changes on that night in February 1952, when she's still very much, you know, she's loving this trip to Kenya, and she's going on safari, and it's a sort of magical experience. And yet the next day, her life and everything changes forever.
Well, perfect segue to my next question. So, of course, we all know on that day in 1952, Her Majesty ascended to the throne unexpectedly, of course. So you write in the book that the Queen genuinely enjoys being queen, and that's how she's been able to maintain this 70-year reign. She embodies the role. She loves what she does. What makes her so well suited for this role?
Yes, it is interesting, isn't it? Because it's certainly not a role that would suit everybody, but she genuinely, as I say throughout the book, she genuinely enjoys, she's energized by it. That's what a lot of people who work for her say. You know, even when there's a crisis, and a lot of us must think, oh, poor Queen, she's got to deal with this. It's in her mind, it's what she's for. She's not just a sort of symbolic figurehead who's there to sort of rubber stamp legislation and cut ribbons. You know, that she likes to feel she is performing a useful role, and she's fascinated by people. You know, she never pretends to be a sort of a great reader, or particularly bookish. She doesn't like lots of spreadsheets, but she's fascinated by what makes people tick, by the human dimension to public life. And she's very stoical, she's very practical, and she's not very sentimental. That's another thing that came through while I was writing it. Both her mother and particularly her son, Prince Charles, they're sort of romantics. They're quite sentimental. They love sort of, you know, reflecting on the past, that sort of thing. The Queen doesn't so much. I mean, she's got this extraordinary reservoir of experience, but I talked to lots of ministers, prime ministers, people who work with her regularly, and, you know, people who, when they come into her presence, they want to hear her sort of stories about, you know, what was Churchill really like? What was it like, you know, dealing with the Suez crisis, or growing up in the Blitz, or all these things. And she doesn't want to talk about that. She wants to focus on the present, on the here and now. And there's a little moment I refer to in the book, and it was a fascinating moment at the time of her Diamond Jubilee 10 years ago. And I happened to be in the room when this happened. And she was coming on a tour of a newly reopened exhibition at Kensington Palace about Queen Victoria. And Queen Victoria was the only other monarch who'd ever had a Diamond Jubilee. And some of the very, very earliest royal film footage is of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee procession to St Paul's Cathedral, and it had been remastered and it was being played out in front of the Queen, and we all just sort of stood back in silence, watching the Queen, watching this film, and you thought, my goodness, here is this monarch watching her great-great-grandmother doing the same thing she's about to do, celebrate a Diamond Jubilee, and she was looking very thoughtful, and we thought, well, I wonder what she's thinking, you know, what must be going through her head. And at the end, she just turned and went, that's interesting. They had 8 horses on the landau. And it was just her sort of practical approach. She was looking at it in terms of, you know, oh, well, that's Queen Victoria was in that carriage, was she? And she had 8 horses. You know, it wasn't a sort of, well, wasn't that amazing? Or look at the crowds. Or and it's often the way with her. She'll take a very practical view in any given situation. You know, after the terrible fire at Windsor, which I think, you know, for many people to see not just your home, your kind of ancestral home, the seat of monarchy, going up in flames, would just, you know, some people I think would just sort of have a nervous breakdown, and obviously it hit her hard. But her first remark when one of my interviewees sort of said, well, I'm so sorry, ma'am, about everything that's happened, and she tried to smile and said, well, at least we saved the paintings. You know, that's her sort of outlook. You know, she's always going to try and accentuate the positive. She's not a down person. And if there's one thing that I suppose, well, many things obviously prompted me to write this book, but I particularly felt that we are increasingly being informed by drama now, particularly The Crown on Netflix, but other films as well. You know, she's been around for so long that the people are now fictionalizing her life. It's something that normally doesn't happen to people until long after they've gone. But she's sitting there having to endure people writing screenplays, films, TV programs, novels, children's books about her, making stuff up about her. And it means that I think we get a slightly distorted picture of her. If you watch The Crown, there's always a lurching from one crisis to the next, and she's always a bit sort of put upon, and it just looks a rather miserable existence. And that's not the real existence, because actually when you talk to people, when you're around her, when you hear from people around her, it's on the whole, she's an upbeat person. She's a smiley person. She's a, well, oh dear, let's get on with it. You know, she's an optimist, and I'm not sure that the public necessarily sense that. So I hope they do now.
Yes.
Well, it comes up many times in the book that The Crown, as popular of a show as it may be, doesn't accurately capture who Queen Elizabeth is, as you were just saying. Is there anything else that The Crown gets wrong about Her Majesty?
Yeah, it makes a number of sort of silly mistakes, which, given the scale of the production, and by the way, I mean, I begin by saying it is beautifully produced, brilliantly written, brilliantly acted. I mean, as a piece of TV, and I speak as something like the old TV program. I mean, I'm kind of in awe of the production values. However, you know, you've got these huge budgets. You'd think that they might not make sort of fairly basic errors, such as Winston Churchill suddenly dying in the middle of summer. It's sort of bright sunshine, and the news comes through that Churchill has died. Well, I mean, the whole sort of narrative around Churchill's death was the fact that it happened in the bleakest midwinter. It was freezing. And little things like that, you know, people popping up in storylines many years after they died. In some instances, there's a private secretary who never seems to retire. It's constantly popping up, you know, years after he'd gone. So those are the small things, but on the bigger front are the sort of the general character portrayals. I think Prince Philip comes across as a rather sort of drifting, unhappy, angry person. I don't think you get anything like the sort of sense of dynamism and innovation that he brought to the institution. You see the Queen picking fights, deliberately trying to undermine her Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. I mean, that just simply never happened. I've spoken to all the people on all sides about that, and I mean, it makes for a good plot, of course. But I think it's quite damaging, because it implies that the Queen would be prepared to deliberately conspire against an elected head of government, and Mrs. Thatcher may have you know, passed on, but the Queen hasn't. She's still in the job. I think, you know, these things, you can argue there's a case for doing this when someone is, you know, A, no longer with us, or B, has at least retired, but neither of those apply. She's still with us, very much so, and she's still doing the job. And I think The Crown just distorts in many ways, sometimes in minor ways, but sometimes in major ways. I mean, for example, the whole sort of depiction of Prince Charles. You know, he comes out of the crown, I think, very badly. You don't see any redeeming features. You don't see, you just see a sort of hunched, brooding, angry person who spends his entire life plotting against his wife. You don't, and that's not the Prince Charles who I've followed now for, I don't know, 30 years, I suppose. I've been writing about the poor man, and you know, it just, to me, it doesn't ring true. And people might say, well, look, it's only a drama, and that's true. It is only a drama. But I have to say, the more I go around the world and I talk to people, I find it is sort of by osmosis. It's becoming the sort of settled narrative of the modern royal story, and it isn't.
So we are starting to run out of time, which I absolutely hate. But I want to ask, in her 70-year reign, what would you say has been her biggest triumph and her biggest misstep?
That's a very big question, very good question, Rachel. I think her biggest triumph, I mean, in one can point to things like the Commonwealth, you know, this extraordinary international organization that had 8 members when she took it over, and now it's 54, spanning a third of the Earth's population, and it's still relevant, it's still going. You could argue that it's, as the head of a dynastic institution, her primary role is to hand over that institution in as good condition as she found it, and I think she's certainly done that. I think her greatest achievement probably is she has spanned. She's the first monarch in history who has had to come to the throne, and instead of consolidating power, expanding horizons, expanding boundaries. I mean, in the words of Land of Hope and Glory, wider still and wider shall thy bands be set. She's been expected to do the reverse. She's been expected to sort of shrink things, hand back, you know, dismantle this empire and all this sort of historic legacy, and try and reconfigure the monarchy in an entirely modern setting. And at a time when, you know, we live in a more secular world than possibly ever before, and a world of 24/7 TV, and a world that doesn't respect people because of how they're born or the position they're born to, nor should they. I mean, and she gets that. She's managed to handle this transition, I think, brilliantly, with a result that, while we all, you know, may debate about the relative merits of, you know, will Charles be a good king or a bad king, and what's William going to do, and with a Megxit and everything else, the fact is, no one really doubts for 1 minute that this institution is with us, and it's here to stay. So I think that's probably her biggest success. And as for her failings, her failures, I mean, yes, there have been a few. There haven't been many. I think you could certainly possibly look to moments when she could have been quicker off the mark. She's never panicked. I can't find any evidence of her ever doing things in a rush, but there have been moments when she's been slow. And I think the royal response in the aftermath of the death of Diana, you could say that was one. I think possibly you look at the way the monarchy has, I don't think, handled its younger members particularly well, and you've only got to look at what's happening with right now with the Duke of York and the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan, the Duchess. You know, the institution has probably focused too much on the top and not on the periphery, and that's been certainly of late where big problems have surfaced. But overall, you know, history will look back on this reign and definitely will place Elizabeth as one of the greats.
We've got one final question for you. You closed the book by quoting Margaret Rhodes, the Queen's cousin and lifelong confidant, saying she did it with such dedication because she wanted to make her father proud of her. We can but wonder what he is thinking now. What do you think he'd have to say about her 70 years on the throne, and what will Her Majesty's ultimate legacy be?
I think he will be he can't be anything but immensely proud. I mean, how could you not be? But I mean, it's just, you know, history, as I say, history will look back on this. I think we can't even start to talk about a new Elizabethan age because it's just been so wide, so broad. I mean, what is Elizabethan in the modern context? I mean, everything is so different from what it was in 1952. But I think her legacy her legacy in Britain will be the transformation from a declining imperial power that was more or less bankrupt at the time to a thriving multicultural nation that's pretty much at ease with itself. I mean, I'm not pretending anything is by any means perfect, but never is in any country. But she's just helped Britain just completely adapt, transform, and still feel good about itself. And on the world stage, I think she's just seen as this constant, this dependable, and ultimately authentic person. You don't have to be from a country that speaks English. You don't have to have any allegiance to her or know her or have met her or seen her. But I still think that the wider world just looks on her as this sort of figure of dependability. And I often think in a changing and turbulent world, these sort of figures can be very reassuring to people. No, I think it won't just be in Britain and it won't just be in her 14 other realms, but I would like to think, hopefully, around the world, everyone will, want to raise a glass to her as she celebrates her Jubilee.
What a life and what a book. Queen of Our Times, The Life of Elizabeth II is out April 5th. Thank you so much for being here with us today. What an honor.
Thank you. The honor's mine, and I hope you enjoy it.
He was such a wealth of knowledge, and I honestly think we could have talked to him for hours. I enjoyed our time with him so much.
I completely agree. So much knowledge from Robert Hardman. That was a really fun conversation that we had with him.
Yeah, he was fascinating. We've got 3 more interviews where that came from. Really excited for all of you to hear the chats we've been having lately.
Listeners, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Podcast Royal. Email us at hellopodcastroyal@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow, rate, and review our podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 58 of Podcast Royal. Bye.
Bye.